Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Amazing how many times winning a conflict with employees is more important than actually succeeding as a business. In our first story, the OP and his colleague did a good thing, and we'll tell you more after a short pause. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You want less shrink? Okay then. I worked at a truck stop long ago that hated food waste. Jen, co-worker on the night shift with me, and we would make sure foods cooked that day were sold by 3 a.m. by selling things at steep discounts starting at 1 a.m. A hot dog that was $2 during the day, 50 cents after 1 a.m. Taquitos normally $1.50, 25 cents each after 1 a.m. We made sure management knew about this and had written confirmation it was okay. We were both early 20s, but not stupid, which is why we got the written permission. Well, the owners decide to sell. Sweet couple in their 70s by then, and awesome bosses. They sold to a corporation that didn't like policies like discounting food, even if it was 3 or more hours old. Standard policy is after 3 hours to discount or toss. We always discounted. So we were told we could no longer sell those old foods at a discount. In the area the truck stop was, it was a small town of about 500 people max. And some of them worked 10 to 12 shifts, so they'd be starving when they came in with $1 or $2 in their pockets at 2 a.m. and really appreciated the discounted foods. They were not happy with the changes the new owners made. Time for some action. Jen and I no longer discounted those items and instead let them go 3 hours, then tossed them, marking them off as shrink. The company started having to throw away 25 to 40 pounds of food a week before it was maybe 10 pounds a week. They were livid. Came out to about $12K every quarter in loss, and they blamed us for it. We both got fired, but we still had friends there, so I got an update about 3 months later. The company lost so much profit from shrinkage that they sold it to someone else after a month. New person put us back the way it was before Corp took over and has since made a nice profit margin from food sales. And our second story. Soccer mom is mad I fired her no-show daughter. SM, entitled soccer mom. SD, daughter who works under me and also plays soccer, 18 years old. Me, moi. So this takes place a few years back. It was shortly before my store manager abruptly quit, and I ended up running the store for a third of the year. Part of my role involved in dealing with staffing issues. At this Dress for Less store, it's very hard to get fired. For anything, including being a no-show. If you had 2 consecutive no-shows or 3 non-consecutive no-shows in a short period, you could be let go for job abandonment. You could call in all the time and still have a job, and some did for a while, but then you'd get a lot fewer hours after that because we couldn't really rely on you. My boss was still making the schedule, and he based it around the availability that was provided to him by staff, so SD had turned in her availability at the start of the semester, and she was scheduled around that. She had maybe 1 to 2 days a week scheduled tops. At this point, she'd not shown up for about 2 weeks, leading to 3 non-consecutive days. I worked that evening and tried to call to get a hold of her. On the second day of her not answering, about 3 calls, I decided to leave a voicemail. Hi SD, this is me at retail store. Due to you having 3 consecutive days of not showing up for work, we're going to have to end your employment with us. Reach out to me if you have any questions at 555-555-5555. Thank you. It was the script my company gave to me. I let the manager know and all was settled. The next morning, I opened the store, and at the moment I was in the office getting some paperwork ready for the day, the phone rang and I picked it up to an angry voice demanding to speak to me. I politely said that I was me and how could I be of help. She proceeded to yell at me how I ruined her daughter's day. I stated that I did not know who she was referring to, but that I do not recall doing anything today that could be looked at that way. She then told me she was SD's mom, and that what we did was unprofessional and horrible. I told her that since SD is 18, I cannot go into details of her daughter's employment. My daughter's just a kid, she screamed. Legally, that's not true, I replied. Well, you scheduled my daughter for time she cannot work, and when she has school and practice, so she should not be fired. I calmly replied that we staff our store based on the availability that's provided to us, and it's set in the system so that it'll only allow that. She said that's not true, and that her daughter's on a soccer scholarship at local community college. I replied, that's good for her, but if she's scheduled to work and cannot, she needs to be able to let us know. And we do have a business to run. My daughter's going to school on a soccer scholarship, and she has to practice hard on soccer, so you have to work around that, she yelled. We staff based on the availability we're provided, and for staff to be employed here, they do have to show up for their shifts, I replied a little testily. At this point, she followed up with, my daughter's going to school to get a much better job than you have in retail. She's going to be a teacher. I curtly replied, oh, that's nice. One of my degrees is in education. And you work here, she said demeaningly. I do, and luckily it pays about twice as much as a teacher makes. So there's nothing in you that can talk down to me, I replied angrily as I slammed the phone. The job market for teachers sucked, and I wasn't necessarily delighted with my career at the moment due to some life situations. She called back immediately, and I picked up, and when I heard it was SM, I hung up again. She didn't call back after. Jeez, she's a horrible mother. An SD, an even worse employee. And our next story. Yeah, sure, I'll come back with ID. I only live around the corner. I'll give a little bit of context first. I live in the UK where it's illegal to operate a petrol pump if you're under the age of 16, and you can take your driving test from the age of 17. The town/village I grew up in was small, and it had just a single petrol station with 2 pumps. Sometimes you have to wait behind a car or two, but being a small town, it was never really much of an issue. At the time, I just recently passed my test and had been driving for a week or two. When you pass your test, they give you a temporary paper license to use until the official one arrives in the post. These paper licenses don't have a photo or anything on them, just your name, address, etc. You might already be able to work out where this is going, so let's get on to the story. It was early Wednesday morning. I had decided to drive into school. My car was almost on empty, so I swung by the petrol station on the way out of town to put my regular $5 in the tank. As a broke student, I could never afford to fill up more than 5 to 10 pounds at a time, so I was a regular visitor at the petrol station. On this particular day, there was a new server behind the counter who I guess had only just started there. Coincidentally, one of the pumps was out of order that morning, which meant there was only one available pump in the whole town. I pull up to the pump, but at this point, there's only one other car behind me. I put my measly amount of petrol in the tank and head over to the garage to pay. As I approach the counter, I notice the attendant is giving me an odd look. The conversation went something like this. Sorry, but can I see some ID? He says to me. I don't have any photo ID with me. Well, I'm afraid I can't sell petrol to someone that might be under 16. A little shell-shocked at the apparent incompetence, I reply, I drove a car in here and you have to be 17 to drive. Is that not proof enough? I'm sorry, but without ID, I can't do anything. Look, I can get my paper license from the car, but it doesn't have a photo on it. Well, it needs to be a photo ID, otherwise I don't know it's really you. Right, well, I live a few minutes away. I can come back with my passport in a few minutes. Okay, but you'll have to leave the car here because I can't let you drive off without paying. At this point, I'm absolutely dumbfounded. It's only a few minutes drive back home, but at least a 20-minute walk, which would mean a 40-minute round trip. Desperate to not have to walk 40 minutes home and back for the sake of 5 pounds, I try one more time. It's going to take me 40 minutes to get some ID. Can you really not sell me this 5 pounds of petrol? I'm afraid not. It's not up to me. I turn around and walk out of the station. Okay, I'll leave the car here and come back in 40 minutes with some ID. Sure enough, I leave the garage and begin to walk home with my car exactly where the attendant told me to leave it. 20 minutes later, I arrive home, but by this point, I'm pretty thirsty. I always left early for school because I work better in the morning and like to get an hour or two of work done before classes start. So with about an hour to spare before I really need to be leaving for school, I decide to make myself a cup of tea and maybe have a second breakfast. All the while, I'm fully aware that my car is currently locked and parked in front of the only petrol pump in the whole town. About 15 minutes pass, by which point I've had a cup of tea and a second breakfast, so I pick up my passport and head out the door. Almost an hour after leaving the garage, I arrive back, passport in hand. Sure enough, there's now a queue of 10 to 15 cars and a very panicked-looking attendant trying to explain to the horde of angry customers why they've had to wait for almost an hour to fill up their cars before they can drive to work. At just about the same time I arrive, the guy's manager shows up. I explained to the manager that I had to leave the car here because without ID, I hadn't been allowed to pay for the petrol, and without paying for the petrol, I hadn't been allowed to drive the car anywhere. Long story short, they ended up issuing over 200 pounds in free petrol to the waiting customers, and I was never again asked for an ID. That dude played himself. He'd already done the illegal part, the pumping. And our last story. Greedy grabbers get exactly what they take. Sweet older lady in our church was a retired nurse, never married, no kids. She had a heart attack, and while she was in the hospital, her niece and nephew thought she was dying. They came and took her stuff. Her apartment was small, but she had some very nice crystal and silver and some lovely antique furniture. When she came home, she had no dishes and almost no furniture. Niece and nephew denied it, but the neighbors had seen them carting everything away. Several years later, she passed away. Her most recent will, dated after her heart attack, left $1 each to her niece and nephew. Everything else went to the church. Her estate was $9 million. I love it when they leave $1 to a crappy relative so they can't contest the will. Brilliant. An amazing smack across the face to the crappy relative. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.